You're listening to the Jewish Entrepreneur Podcast with Debbie Sassen, episode number 191. Welcome to the Jewish Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Sassen. I went from being a financial advisor, author, and chronic under-earner to building my business to six figures as a financial planner and money mindset coach, and then onto multiple six figures as a full-time money and business coach. I help entrepreneurs create money-making businesses and build wealth using sales and money mindset strategies and in alignment with authentic Jewish values. Now, let's dive in to today's show. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have a fabulous guest, Sarah Miller, who is a mom. She is a part-time entrepreneur, a physician's assistant. She does so many things, and she also manages something that is very near and dear to my heart. It has been that way since I was a financial planner back in the day, called a family emergency binder. And we're going to jump into the interview in just a couple of minutes. But before we dive in, I want to tell you about my new money membership, Worthy Money. This is a membership focused only on money. It is predominantly for entrepreneurs, although it also works for you if you are an employee, because we're going to be talking about money, you feeling worthy around money. We're going to detach your self-worth from your net worth, and I'm going to help you build your net worth through smart money management and investing. We're going to be talking about pricing if you are an entrepreneur, raising your prices, if you're an employee, how you can negotiate to get a higher price. Because if you want to really have a good, less stressful life, I don't want to say stress-free because stuff always comes along, but there is so much stress involved with money flowing into and out of your life. And if you really want to be on the other side of that, making more money, raising your prices, having a cushion in savings, investing for your future. That could be for your future to help your kids launch. That can be for your future for buying a new house, buying a bigger house. It can be your future for your retirement. But making sure that your money is growing as you grow so that there's something for the future, that is so important. So in Worthy Money, we're going to be working on healing your relationship with money, having sensible, smart systems. That's a lot of S's. Having systems to manage your money. How are you going to grow and scale your money, protect your money, and build long-term wealth? And of course, everything is going to be underlined by you believing that you are worthy of receiving more money, holding more money, and growing it for the future. So go to my website, debbiesassen.com/worthy to see all the details. We're going to get started with our first live meeting on the 24th of November. But you can jump in now. There is a content library full of amazing content that will help you start working on and transforming your relationship with money. And right now, in November 2025, before this podcast is launching, you can get into Worthy Money for $47 a month. This is an absolutely no-brainer price for you to change your relationship with money for the rest of your life. So go to my website, debbiesassen.com/worthy and join us. All right, my friends, let me tell you a little bit about Sarah Miller, who is our podcast guest today. Sarah is a part-time physician associate, part-time entrepreneur, and like every mom, she's a full-time mom and a wife. As a critical care physician associate, Sarah works in the ICU in her community hospital. And that is so connected with what we're going to talk about today regarding the family emergency binder. And Sarah knows this work so personally. Also, her husband, I didn't know this before we started, her husband is a firefighter, so they really understand the importance of the family emergency binder. And in her spare time, Sarah and I both enjoy the same thing, which is hiking, being in nature, RVing. It's been a long time since I've been RVing, but we have so much in common. And I knew for so many reasons I had to have Sarah on the show. So let's dive in and discuss family emergency binders. Let's go. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really excited for this conversation. I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show to speak so specifically about money and managing your money and this kind of thing. We're going to be talking about in case of emergency binder, because listen, life happens. and we have to understand what's going to be happening with our money and our healthcare, et cetera. But before we go into what we're going to talk about today, just give our listeners a little bit of a background about who you are, what you do. You do a lot of things so that we
I do.
all are. You do. So tell us.
Hi. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. I'm Sarah. I am a daughter of God, first and foremost. I'm a wife. My husband and I have two little boys. Right now, they're currently 5 and 3.
Nice.
I'm a critical care PA, so I work part-time nights in the ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also the entrepreneur of two different businesses. I have a virtual assistant business, and I also run the family emergency binder that we're going to talk about today. So I started when I was pregnant with my first son. I
Okay.
knew that I wanted to go part-time. And my husband and I had talked about this, I think even before we were married, of kind of when you dream about your life and what you're going to do. And so we had known about this and planned for it for a long time. And I'm also a personal finance nerd and love all things money and
Yay.
have spreadsheets and budgets. And so we knew going into it that financially we would be fine for me dropping down to part-time after the baby was born. But still, I was thinking, is there something that I can do to kind of bridge that gap with our income, and bridge it a little bit? What can I do that I could do from home when I'm
Mm-hmm.
home with the baby? Because my husband's a firefighter and I'm an ICU PA. So we work very strange shifts. And
Wow.
we were able to work it out that one of us is at work and one of us is home with the children. So we don't have to worry about a nanny or daycare. So when he's at work, though, it's just me at home. So there's something that I could do at home while the baby's napping or even while he's just kind of playing in a little play mat that I could do from home. And as I was kind of researching and thinking about what I could do, this opportunity to become a virtual assistant fell in my lap.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of an online community run by this woman named Chelsea Brennan, and she
Right.
taught women, specifically moms, but mostly women, about money management and money mindset and investing and teaching your kids about money and all these types of things, which are all things that I love. So I was really involved in her community. And one day she reached out to me and said, "Hey, my VA is leaving. Would you like to join my business, join us and be the VA?" And I said, "This is exactly what I'm looking for. It's something that I can do from home on my own time.
Amazing.
But I don't really know what a VA is or what a VA does." And she's like, "You can figure it out. It'll be great." And so she taught me kind of the systems of her business. And I helped support her business with a lot of administrative things. And I loved it. This is perfect. I love that part of my brain that's just organized and efficient and creating systems to make sure things are streamlined and all that type of a thing. So after working with her for a little bit, I created my own business and now support several different women entrepreneurs in their businesses, kind of running the background of their business so they can do all the creative things in the front. So that's why I got started as a VA. And then more recently, Chelsea has kind of revamped her business. She's actually started a different business and kind of gone away from those original things that she was working on. And one of the things that she's had is the family emergency binder, which is
Right.
an incredible product
Yeah.
that I think almost everyone should need that I know we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But as she was kind of revamping her business, we were both talking about it and said, we don't want the family emergency binder to just kind of go to the wayside. So I acquired that from her, and now I'm the owner of the family emergency binder and wanted to share about more of that with you and your listeners.
I love that. So let's connect a few dots before we go on. First of
Yeah.
all, Chelsea ran a summit. I think it's 6 years ago. I even have a sweatshirt.
Oh,
Mama's Talk
yep.
Money. I still have a sweatshirt because I gave a talk on that summit.
Yeah.
So she did incredible work and was really out there in the forefront. I mean, listen, we all need to talk about money. We all need to manage our money, get on board with money. So, and because I have my own business, I wasn't really involved in her community. I didn't need it. I was working as, I mean, I'm sure that's actually a little bit arrogant to say, though. Right. To say I didn't need it, I'm sure there were, hundreds of things that I could have learned from her because we each learn in our own way. And there's so much. I once did just a brain dump of different, different ways that money comes into and out of our life. And I had 21 ways
Yes. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
from like insurance and savings and credit cards and cash. There were so many different ways that money impacts our life and it flows to us and flows through us. So that was like just quickly 21. So that was a lot of fun. And I didn't stay involved, but the emergency binder was something that I always supported. I bought it and I've recommended it to clients, especially when I was doing financial planning more. And now I'm sort of morphing back into more of the financial planning type work. I, did a lot of business coaching and money coaching. Now I'm adding a little bit more financial planning back in with the launch of my program, Worthy Money. So the emergency binder is something that we're actually talking about in that program. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for anybody who's interested. But what occurred to me as you were sharing your background, being a nurse in ICU and your husband being a firefighter, right? Like you probably see emergency situations all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, we both do. And so he kind of sees the forefront of emergencies going into a fire. He also is an EMT, so if someone's calling for an ambulance, and then I kind of see what really comes from the back end of that is if you're getting admitted to the hospital and you're sick enough to have to come to the intensive care unit, that's when I take care of you. Mhm.
So you guys, unlike someone who is doing just a different kind of job, an accountant might see how valuable it is, or a lawyer, but you guys are out there on the front lines, like really on the front lines,
Yeah,
and know how important it is if people don't have their ducks in a row.
exactly. Yes, every day, unfortunately, I see death and dying every day that I'm at work, and sometimes it's extremely unexpected.
Mhm.
Someone gets critically ill or has a terrible accident, and it's obviously just very unexpected. And sometimes, even if it is sort of expected, like, grandma is 99 years old,
Yeah.
she's not going to live forever. So it's not terribly surprising if grandma gets sick or, is in the process of dying, but still it can be shocking when it happens. If she gets
Mhm.
so sick that all of a sudden she's in the hospital and what's going on. So kind of, I see the gamut of all types of emergencies and different ways that families respond to it. And so I've seen in real life, in person, of families who are prepared versus families who aren't prepared. I've talked with families who said, hey, we've had some of these conversations before about what mom would want or what she wouldn't want. And we've talked about this. And hey, we know at home kind of the list of things that we're going to need to do. And it's beautiful when I can talk to families like that. It is such a gift to be able to give this to your family, to kind of have everything laid out and planned out if and when the inevitable happens and you do get very sick or when you do die. It is such a gift to give this to your family. That's one less thing for them to worry about. They're going to be grieving you. They're going to be sad. It's a very stressful situation if you're sick in the hospital. This is one less thing to worry about.
So let's just break down because people come in and they're prepared, and maybe then we'll talk about some of the, I don't know, horror stories about people not being prepared, just so people are like, okay, listen, everybody needs a wake up call now and again. But
Mhm.
when people come in prepared, break down for us the specifics of how having a family emergency binder helps them when they get to the hospital.
Mhm. So it can help in a few different ways. So if you or your loved one who, is so sick that you can't even talk, you might be in a coma or something. So there's no way that you can talk. Or even if maybe you can talk and interact, but just a little bit and you're terribly ill and can't really go into the details of your life, that's when the emergency binder is so helpful. So the emergency binder has all kinds of different things that you would need if you or your loved one are in the hospital. So some kind of just the day-to-day running of your household. What bills need to be paid? What bills are already on autopilot that are already just coming out of the bank account? Are there a couple of bills that might still need to be paid manually? And
Okay.
hey, we got to still do that while you're in the hospital. So that's listed in there. Things like your regular routines. So if you have young children at home, what's their routine? When do they go to school, and kind of what do they like for lunch? What's the bedtime routine? What's their favorite things? What's maybe their pediatrician, their dentist. Someone would need to know that's in the emergency binder. Your pets, what do they eat? Where's Do they have any medication? If they might need to be boarded, hey, maybe it'd be easier to kind of put the pet in wherever they usually go, a little pet vacation. Maybe that'll be easier while you're in the hospital. It's there in the emergency binder, all listed out of all those types of things. And then, of course, the emergency binder includes stuff like your insurance. What kind of insurance things do we need to know, from health insurance to life insurance? Any type of insurance that you would need is in there. And then your employer information. Maybe while you're sick and in the hospital, someone needs to notify your employer that, hey, you're not going to be coming to work. Who might need to be notified in your life? If you're sick, getting surgery, going to be in the hospital for a while, all these are listed out in the binder.
We carry so much information in our brains. Like, all of that, and I remember when Chelsea, one of the things that I think she added it at some point or updated was, like, your child's favorite stuffed animal, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's such a great idea." I mean, my kids were bigger at that point. We were done with stuffed animals, but
Mhm.
and having a daughter who just gave birth and my husband went to babysit while I went with my daughter to the hospital, yeah, you need to know the bedtime routines and who needs the cuddly toy and who needs a song and you to hold their hand and there's such important things, and even when my mom I got a call, this was almost 12 years ago, that she was in the ICU. She ended up having an aneurysm, and I didn't make it there before she passed away. But a friend of mine came over who is a geriatric nurse. We're still great friends. Oh, in fact, I'll tell you a story about her. And she was with my kids because I couldn't think, right? And when you get in these stressful situations, you're like thinking just like leaves you. I didn't know what to do. I
Exactly.
hadn't been in this situation before. It was very clear to me. My sister made it very clear that mom's not going to make it. I'm like, okay, I just need to get there. But my friend came over. She happened to have been, God plans, right? That she was in the neighborhood. She doesn't live close to me, like a 45-minute drive. And she came and told my kids stories, told them about her dog when she was growing up, and she kept them entertained so I
Mhm.
could use the little bit of executive functioning that I had to put things in my suitcase so I could and find an airplane ticket so I could get to my mom. But
Mhm.
this friend of mine, she and her husband, her first husband, had been married. They were like high school sweethearts. And she was in her late 50s. She's a geriatric nurse, and he, first of all, hated hospitals. He hated doctors. He was one of these so he woke up and's like, "I need an ambulance." Like, he wasn't feeling good. At some point, it's like, "I need an ambulance." They were in the ambulance. They got to ICU, and he didn't make it. He had a heart attack and very, 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 very quick. And they'd been together a very long time. And it did impact her because a lot of these pieces of information that could have been available in a family emergency binder, she didn't have access to because they were in their 50s. Who thinks about
Mhm.
it when they're in their 50s? And you're even talking about little kids and their stuffed animals and what their bedtime routine is. It's so important at every age to put
Mhm.
this together.
Exactly. Yep. And even if, when we're talking now about the worst case scenario, you're dying, you're critically ill, in the worst case scenario. But even, the emergency binder can be used for kind of not that worst case scenario. Let's say you're on a business trip or
Mhm.
or maybe you went away for the weekend with friends or something. And so it's the weekend. Your spouse usually doesn't do the Monday through Friday routine. It's fine for the weekend. Or, whoever's watching the kids, no big deal. But then your flight gets canceled. So
Mm.
everyone's alive and healthy, but now your flight gets canceled. You're not going to be able to get home. Who's taking the kids to school on Monday? Where is the bus stop? What's the after school routine? What do we like for a snack? And what you said, what's the favorite bedtime story? Someone going to be putting to the bed who doesn't. And they're like your friend who was able to come over last minute, was in the perfect place at the perfect time, God willing.
Yeah.
And, who's going to step in and do that? Maybe it's your spouse who doesn't really have this role, or maybe it's your mom or dad or your sibling or an aunt or uncle, a close friend who's going to come over and say, "Hey, I can come in and help, but I don't really know what to do." Or just pull out the binder. Here's the page of kind of the normal, regular routine, and they have it all handled. And that's one less thing for you to worry about as you're struggling to reschedule a flight and get back and figure out all the other things that you need to figure out.
It's so smart. I know it's been so long since I had little kids, so I can just rely on my older kids to take care of my younger kids. And
Right.
I live in a community where the neighbors will just step in and do something. But I can see how having it all laid out can be very helpful. And you don't have to have all of your important financial information. Like, you don't need to have your bank accounts with their passwords listed on the same thing as here are my kids' favorite foods and here are their allergies. And but also, if your kids go to someone's house to sleep, it's already printed out. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel every single time. They know that my child has a milk intolerance and they just won't give them milk or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. What I do is so if when you purchase the binder, there's three versions of it. There's a version for no kids, version
Mhm.
for minor children, and then a version for adult children. And so if you have, and when you buy, you have access to all three, and you always will. And so if your life situation changes and you were just newly married and now you're starting to grow a family, and you have access to all versions of the binder. But for the minor children version, what I like to do is make kind of a mini binder of just those things of children's allergies, medications, favorite things, routines, kind of just that mini binder that's easy if a guardian needs to come in because you're stuck on a work trip or you have to go somewhere, even if it's planned ahead of time.
Mhm.
We're going away for the weekend, you're going to stay at grandma and grandpa's. Here's what they need to know. And for me, I use it for our babysitter. We have a babysitter who comes over. She's a teenage girl in our neighborhood, and she's fantastic. And she's used to babysitting the boys, but still just kind of as a little backup. Here's just that reminder. Here's the emergency contacts if she would need to call my mom for something or another neighbor, and it's all right there to easily pull out. And like you said, it doesn't have all those other things that are in the binder, like your insurance information, your financial information. The babysitter doesn't need to know all that.
What information is in the binder? What information is in the binder that people usually forget? Like, you've mentioned insurance, we've mentioned like bank accounts, the phone number of your accountant, of your lawyer, but what information do people not even think about?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably some of them are, we list out all your online accounts. So online accounts and passwords to everything, even for the big things like your bank account and where you might have your investments, but things like maybe your Facebook account, all your emails. Do you have a special work email that someone, but here's the passwords to everything? They're all listed out there. Are you part of any rewards memberships? They're all listed in there. If you have rental properties, and then there's even things, the binder, right now we have two versions of the binder. You can get a digital download or you can get a flash drive box. We'll send you a box with every kind of already downloaded on the flash drive. Currently, for now, we don't have a physical version of the binder, but in the binder, when you do print it out and fill it out, there's where to find all your documents. So it's something people like, hey, I know we have a will. I know that we have this special paperwork, but it lists in the binder, here's where to actually go and find it. Here's where we have it. Where do you have extra sets of keys for things? That's in there. If you are in the military, we have for the United States, the US military has special things for when you die, different awards that you might get for military service,
Mm.
special things that would happen for your funeral. That's in there. And then for anyone, we have funeral preferences in there, things to think ahead. Something that I like that's in the binder that people might not think about is near the end, there's a place for you to write letters. And I think handwriting is probably nicer than typing, but you could do either way of writing letters to your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So whether maybe you know that you have a terminal illness and you know it's coming, or maybe just, hey, just who knows what could happen, and you write letters. And you can update it every year. Maybe every year you write a letter to your loved ones. And it could just be something nice, even way before you die, to kind of go through and share with them and share your important thoughts to them.
That's beautiful.
Mhm.
As we go through all of this, and you're a busy mom with your two side hustles and your job and your family and your little kids, and I know what it's like. I don't really remember raising a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, but I have a lot of grandchildren around that same age, so I know that they're very demanding and, they need your attention and they need your love, etcetera. It can get really overwhelming thinking about putting all of the pieces together for the family emergency binder. And I can already sense with me just the resistance to wanting to do it. And we have it and we've done it, and I'm sure that we're well overdue for an update. If somebody is committed, or they're like, okay, we're recording this at the end of 2012, they're like, my 2026 goal is to make sure that we have this thing filled out, soup to nuts, top to
Mhm.
bottom. How long does it take someone, do you think, to complete a family emergency binder if they're like, we're going to do a little piece every week?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. I think to start out, that's exactly what you should do is schedule it on your calendar, like an appointment to say, hey, this day, this time, I'm going to spend 30 minutes, an hour working on the binder. It's
Mhm.
scheduled, it's on your calendar. So I think that's the first step. And then if you do that, and again, it depends on maybe how many things you have, or we've had
Right.
people reach out to say, I need 3 more pages of credit card information because I've got 400 credit cards. I don't know that
Mhm.
they have people ask for extra. So,
You're like, it's PDF. You can just print out more PDFs, guy. It's okay. Go to PDF Escape and add them into your binder yourself. Okay.
thank you exactly. But, so I would say probably within 6 weeks, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but I would say probably about 6 weeks. If you did it, every week for about an hour, that I think you could get it all filled out. And I would say, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed with this is my whole life I'm putting in here from everything you can imagine
Mhm.
of running your life, your household, it can definitely feel overwhelming. Start with the easy things first. Start with things of what's your emergency contact numbers? What's your pet food? And start with the kind of the easier things that you
Mhm.
know already off the top of your head. You don't have to go hunt down and say, what is this bank account number? And where do we have this? And some of that is just, it may not feel emotionally tolling, but it can be, just the process of going through and hunting down all the things. And then other parts of the binder are definitely more emotional, like those letters or thinking about the special things for your children if you have children.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I would also say that when you're filing your taxes, you're collecting a lot of this
Yep.
information anyway. And for those of us like me who are US citizens living outside of the United States, we need to file an FBAR every
Mhm.
year. And so I'm collecting my information. I have an Excel sheet. It has my accounts, it has the account numbers. So that's really easy to do, rather than reinventing the wheel again. Like, I'm going to do this, for my tax year, and then I'm going to do it again. Just put it in your calendar, add another 15 minutes because you can be collecting information either for your accountant for your quarterly taxes or to put in some sort of FBAR or something else that you have. But you can just add a little bit of extra time, and that way you can tick off some of the boxes. Because I know just hearing us talk on this episode, you could be like, "Oh my gosh, I need to do it," and it needs to be like an entire Sunday. You need to like blank out your calendar. I'm not allowed to do anything else. Do not pass and go. Do not collect $200. I can't do anything till this is done, and then you're just going to burn out.
Exactly. You get way too overwhelmed and then give up on the whole thing. So yes, if you're already collecting information for your taxes, or maybe you're applying for financial aid for your children, whether they're in college or a private school, we had to do that recently. And so that, hey, I'm collecting all this information already. Do it once, and that you're killing two birds with one stone. And you can just put things into the emergency binder after you've already collected it for taxes or whatever else you needed it for.
That's great. And tell me something, because we talked about passwords before. Like I use LastPass to collect all my passwords. Now, as it happens, Google also collects many of my passwords. Let's even talk about cleaning those up. I don't know if that's really the conversation, but like there are things in my LastPass that I don't even log into those things anymore. So cleaning up and decluttering our finances, right? You have a VA service. So we have so much information, and somebody's going to go into my computer and they're going to, my work emails and stuff like that. They are just, I have an entire basement. Rather than decluttering my basement, they're decluttering all of my digital files. So
Yeah.
how do we make order and sense out of all of that and keep things up to date? And yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, trying to figure out what's important versus what's really not. I
Mm-hmm.
think part of that is as you're going through and updating your binder and you're going through, especially it's nice if you have something like LastPass. Here's all the passwords to everything I have. It's easy to kind of put things in. And as you're going through there, I would say, hey, I logged onto this website once, never needed it again. Let's just clean it up, delete it, not even include it.
Hmm.
Maybe at that point, as you're going through, you delete it from your LastPass. Maybe you don't even include it in the binder. Maybe make a note in your binder to say, hey, there's extras, especially if you run your own business. That can get tricky. There's a little part in the binder about if you have your own business,
Oh, that's
and who do you have a business partner, and what would they need to know versus if you don't, then definitely what happens to your business at that point. There's a lot of extra things that you might not need. So you might have a note of just saying, for me, same thing. I have LastPass. In my LastPass is a lot of my clients' information, so I can do the things that I need to do for them. So that could be a note in my binder to say, ignore all of these things for my client. That is not something that you would need for me. And if I died, my business dies with me, and we would let the clients know that I am no longer here to support
right.
their business.
Someone has to go and do that. And, occasionally I see that on LinkedIn because, when that people say, oh, they're logging in on their parents' account or someone's in, like, thank you all for being here. And they're letting people know. But yeah, you need to let people know how to get into LinkedIn and Facebook and thank you all for being here. And these are like real life and death situations that people don't want to think about, but it's so important.
Mhm. And that's what I talk about with my patients too all the time. No one wants to think about death or your most treasured people in your life leaving us. No one wants to think about that. But we're all going to have to at some point. And I think it's
Wow.
much easier to think about it, talk about it, plan for it when we're all healthy and sitting around our own kitchen table, when there's no emergencies happening, when everything's kind of just calm, normal, regular day. This is the time to talk about it. This is the time to prepare for it. So when inevitably it does happen, which hopefully is a long time from now, and hopefully in a very peaceful setting and not an emergency thing like I see, that we've already prepared for it. Because when the emergency is happening, when someone's critically ill in the hospital, you're already so stressed. And like you were talking about, just you barely had bandwidth to pack a suitcase and book a plane ticket.
Right.
It's so hard to talk about anything beyond what we're seeing right now. So before any of this happens, that's when is the time to plan everything out. And we were talking about passwords. I think it's a really important thing to mention with passwords is you can have it all. You have your binder all filled out. Everything's ready to go. Maybe you print a physical copy of your binder and put it in the safe in your basement. You have a digital copy on a flash drive and you made it password protected to keep everything secure. Excellent. Make sure whoever is going to be the person who needs access to the binder, whether it's your spouse or another loved one, do they know the password to get on there? Do they know the combination to the safe to get in there? Don't forget those things to tell them, or hey, everything will be all filled out and wonderful. How are they going to access it? That's something to keep in mind because I've heard stories like that of dad always said everything's in the safe, everything's in the safe, and then one day dad dies, and then they realize
how do we get anything is in the safe and we have no idea how to get in there.
Mhm.
So if you have a physical copy, and this I think about it, especially your husband is a firefighter, what do you do if you have the physical copy and it literally goes up in smoke?
Right. So I recommend having a couple saved copies. I think it's good to have a physical copy that's easy to flip through and look at, and then have some digital copies. Have a digital copy on your computer, on a flash drive, and again, keep that somewhere safe. But yes, what if your house caught on fire? What if there was a flood or a tornado or some kind of natural disaster or something? So you can put, if whatever physical copy you have or even the flash drive, you can put it in a fireproof safe in your house.
Mhm.
That being said, fireproof safes are fireproof only to a certain degree and to a certain time. So
Mhm.
if your whole house went down in flames, likely that safe will also burn down. My husband has seen that in fires of the fireproof safe is only fireproof to a certain degree and a certain number of minutes of burning.
Yeah, my parents live in Los Angeles, and they have very, very close friends whose house went down within the first 4 hours of the Malibu fire, and there was,
Mhm.
like, nothing left of their house, nothing, nothing. Yeah, that's devastating.
Exactly. It's devastating to lose literally everything. So with that, I would say to also keep a version of the binder outside of your home. So whether that's maybe in a bank in a safe deposit box, you could do that,
Okay.
or give it to a trusted loved one. Maybe it's the loved one who would be the person, hey, if I'm sick, if I'm dead, you're the one who's taking care of things, give them a copy of it. Or maybe your spouse would be the person to take over, but you want to give a copy to your mom or your sister or something like that. Find a trusted loved one and say, hey, can you keep a copy of my emergency binder in the safe at your house? And that would be my recommendation to have it there. And again, this has all of your personal information on it. So it would be a trusted loved one. They wouldn't need to read it or go through it at that time, but hey, it's
Mhm.
there. And that could be good too, if it's going to be your sister who's going to step in if you're sick, if you are stranded when your flight got canceled, when you die, hey, you're going to need access to the binder for whatever type of emergency is happening. So yes, maybe your sister would have to go to your house, make sure she has a key to your house to get in, but that's an extra step of traveling over there, getting the binder from your thing. It could just be easier for her to say, hey, I have a copy locked away in my basement. If I ever need it, I can quickly access it and get it and then start taking care of what needs to be taken care of.
Right. During COVID, my husband was very proactive and he initiated that we go to a lawyer and get durable powers of attorney for healthcare and for financial care because it was like in the beginning of 2020, nobody really knew. And all we knew was that there were some like really severe cases happening. And so we were in our late 50s at the time. And we have to take care of this better now than never. And when you have these conversations, all of a sudden, real life, you're being an adult around money, being an adult around what you own, and you and your spouse, you and your sister, you and your kids, your mom, depending on your age. I think that also you become so much more empowered around your money and your belongings. People have said to me, I want to be an adult around money. Well, this is like one way to adult your money,
It.
right? And what do you see among your clients or maybe even in the ICU when people have all of these, pieces very organized versus the people who don't? Like, what other conversations are they having maybe on a more adult level or not, when they really talked through it, thought through it, planned? What's the difference between we might call them the haves and the have-nots. How's that?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I think you used a good word just then, saying that they're more empowered.
Uh,
They definitely feel more empowered and more in control of what's happening in what can be a very frantic, uncontrollable situation or feel like that. That, of course, they're scared, they're nervous, what's going on with mom who's sick and dying in the hospital. But they do feel empowered of, hey, I'm kind of going through the steps of this illness or what's happening right now with her, but I know at home, everything's running, everything's smooth. We know what's happening. It's one less thing for me to worry about as I'm having conversations with my parents or my patients and their families. I can tell that they have they're a little more calm. Hey, we already know if this happens, we want to do this. If this happens, we're going to do that. They already kind of have a game plan looking ahead and looking to the future, so they feel a little less nervous, a little less frantic. They do feel more empowered in their decision making. So I think it helps ground them in kind of where we are and what could be happening going forward.
So tell us a horror story. We want to shake people up a little bit. The ones who are like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. It's so overwhelming, but they're just going to keep pushing it off because we're all humans. We all don't love to do this stuff. It's definitely not the most enjoyable. I'd much rather go for a hike or, go and take my grandkids out for ice cream or something like that. So, what happens sometimes if you don't have your emergency binder all together and in order?
Hmm. I think one of the worst horror stories that I've seen is if you have any kind of blended family. So you've got children, stepchildren, and so that can cause disarray. Or if there's just, and sometimes I've just seen it with a lot of family members. You have several children, you have your own siblings who are involved in decision making, and so now we have everyone kind of coming in and saying what's going to happen. Like we had a gentleman who was probably, I think he was in his 70s, who had a devastating stroke.
Okay.
And so he was on life support, wasn't able to interact at all on life support. And, the neurologist is saying there's really no chance of recovery.
Hmm.
And so part of that conversation is, do we think he will die imminently no matter what we do versus, doing hospice or doing a long-term life support, kind of making those decisions. And so when we have, I think he had 6 or 7 adult children. And so they all have opinions. And then grandchildren are also involved. And then he had a couple siblings that were alive. And so everyone has different opinions, different wishes. What would they want for dad versus grandpop? And so everyone wants something different. And so just trying to, what we always, the focus is on him. We, no matter how much we're hurting, we want to do what's best for him and what he would want. What did he ever talk about any of these types of situations? What was he like in his life so far up to now? What are things that he would want or not want? So, have you ever had these conversations or not? And so we've never talked about that. Dad was never, nope. You bring up one mention of getting sick and no, 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 we're not going to talk about that. Put blinders on. And so it just makes these conversations so much harder and so much more difficult and drags it out. And really the only person who's really hurting from this is the patient, because
Right.
if he just doesn't get, we have no idea what he would want or not want. And that, really hurts him more than anyone else, I think.
We haven't talked about it.
We've never talked about it. One of the saddest things was I had a woman who, it was right around Christmas time, who had a brain aneurysm and she died. And she was a young woman in her 40s with a young family. And so again, we never expected it. She's 40 something years old. She's so young. We don't even need to think about death or end of life. We have so much time for that,
Hmm.
but you don't always have that time. So I remember coming home from work one day and it was one of these days where we had a couple patients dying. Again, we're having these conversations with other families and, we've never talked about this. We don't know what we want and we're just prolonging suffering on life support. And when, what do they want versus not want? Yes, they would want this or not. And so having these difficult conversations with families, it happened all day long to the point that when I came home from work, I called my own parents and said, Mom and Dad, we need to talk about these things. I've done this all day long and we're just going to talk about it right now. You're healthy. I think at the time they were probably maybe in their late 50s, early 60s. They were probably in their 50s at the time. But no, we're talking about it now. Would we want this or not this? In this situation, this is okay. This is not okay. Let's talk about it all right now. So we know it now because we're not going through all the question and the fighting and all of that if and when you do get terribly ill or something happens.
Right. And you said that you're one of 4 children, correct?
Mhm. Yep, I'm the
So,
oldest of 4.
so how do you guys organize it in your family? Because you picked up the phone and said, Mom and Dad, we're talking about it. But then what happened with your siblings?
Yeah. So that I think just defers. I think a lot of it defers to me. Number one, because I'm the oldest, and number two, because I'm in medicine. And
Okay.
so since I'm a PA, medical questions always kind of defer to me. No one else of my siblings are in the medical field. So a lot of that automatically defers to me, which I'm okay with, and which my siblings are okay with too. Of, hey, let's all have a discussion of, you know, what does mom and dad want and not want, and how would we do this? My parents years ago had gotten a will and kind of already went through some of that on their own with their lawyer, which was
Mhm.
great that they had already set some of that groundwork. And then we can just continue those conversations.
I think that's also,
Okay.
I think it's also important just to point out the importance of having a will.
Mhm.
My husband and I updated our will a couple of years ago. We had written the first will like 20 years earlier. And two of my children hadn't even been born when we wrote that will. And we had all sorts of things like if something happened to us and who was going to take care of our kids, custodial care. And both of our parents live outside of Israel. His parents are in England, mine are in the United States. And we wanted our kids to stay here. So then you have to talk to your friends. Would you be willing, if something happened, would you be willing to care for our kids? And we would put a financial fund in place. And yeah, these are really adult conversations. And then you can put it into your emergency binder or whatever. And thank God my youngest is 18. He is a legal adult. No one will ever need to care for my children other than my children. So, I mean, if something happened to me, God forbid, tomorrow, my 18-year-old has adult sisters and brothers, but we're not giving us an evil eye or anything. But yeah, these are important, like real life conversations. And when you love your spouse, when you love your children, your sisters, brothers, your parents, nobody plans to fail, right? We fail to plan. That's the expression, right? We don't intend to make more of a burden for our family, but by not planning, not putting these simple things in place that could take 6 weeks, doing it not just in one sitting, but doing it over a period of time, it could take 6 weeks. That's it. By the end of 2025, you can have it all taken care of. Or, before the end of January 2026, you can just put that as your goal. Don't buy a gym membership in 2026. Nobody stays with their weight loss goals at the beginning of the calendar year. Buy the emergency binder. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes because this is really what's going to give you peace of mind. This is going to help you adult money and put all of your financial pieces of work, any cloudiness and fogginess around what's happening with your money, with your insurance. You might even discover that you have 2 or 3 insurance policies which do the exact same thing. When I sit down with clients, it's amazing what we discover when we all of a sudden look at everything that's happening under the hood of their finances.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And like you said, you point out an important thing in there is not only to have your own will, but if you have minor children and you and your spouse both die, who's taking care of them? Having that in place, having a trust, all of these things, it's tantamount to have a guardian named for your children if you have minor children. Because if you don't, it's the government will decide for you.
Right.
And so maybe that's fine, kind of whatever might be next of kin. Maybe you're okay with that. But if you're not, if it would be someone else, who would you choose if you would want that? That's so important. And yep, to have that in the binder of here's our wishes, here's where to find information, here's the contact information for the lawyer. All of that is just so important to have. And it is such an act of love.
Yes.
It's a great gift. And it is an act of love to your loved ones that you would leave behind.
Yeah. So is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you think is important that we cover before we end this episode?
I think we covered all of it, kind of what the binder includes, the different versions of the binder that you can get, and to have it maybe have it printed out after you to have that physical copy and to have a digital copy as well. I think multiple copies is good just in case something happens to one, or maybe even your digital copy. You know how technology can be and a computer just crashes and you're never getting anything back from it.
Right.
And to have extra copies is good. And that, yeah, can really be used for all of life's emergencies. The big things that we talked about today and kind of those kind of little everyday things that happen.
Mhm. Right. And I think the one thing that I like to do is it comes in a PDF, the digital one. You can just have the original and leave it blank and then save multiple copies. So you'll have your 2025 version. You'll come back in 2 years and you'll have your 2027 version, etc. But you'll always have that template. So you only need to buy it once and you're good to go. And I just want to add before we close, I don't do affiliate, I don't have a lot of affiliate income. But I feel so strongly about the emergency binder. I think it's the only product, and I haven't pushed it in a long time. I haven't recommended it in a long time, but I'm so glad that you reached out to me and told me that you took it over and we can share this on the podcast. But I feel so strongly about it that this is really one product that I am an affiliate for, but my earning an affiliate commission does not in any way impact the price. What's the price currently? Because it's been a while since I've shared it.
It is $39.
Oh, that is
Dollars.
very reasonable to give your loved ones peace of mind. I mean, you can send them chocolates and balloon and it's going to cost more than the $39. So we'll put it in the show notes, emergencybinders.com, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
We'll put that link in the show notes. And please go, everybody who's listening, go get yourself a family emergency binder and give your family, the loved ones, the people that you care about most, give them the love that you want them to have and the peace of mind that you want them to have because nobody wants these things to happen, but life happens. Or as we say, man plans, God laughs. And you want to be prepared when the inevitable does happen, because it will.
Oh, well, I appreciate that so much, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been a pleasure having you this week on the podcast.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Jewish Entrepreneur Podcast. I know you have a lot to take away, and if there's just one step that you take forward to getting your paperwork together, we talked about just like, what are your kids like if something happens to you? Your plane gets delayed, which as I'm recording, there's been a federal shutdown in the U.S. Planes are getting delayed, and somebody needs to take care of your kids when you're not there. What are their cuddly toys? What are their favorite foods? What allergies do they have? And of course, getting your will together, making sure that somebody knows what happens if you're in the hospital. You can't take care of yourself. Someone needs to speak on your behalf, whether it's durable powers of attorney or how are you going to have your accounts managed, your finances. Who's going to pay your electricity bill if you can't do it? Make sure that you go to my website, debbiesassen.com/ICE. That stands for ICE in case of emergency. ICE/binder. Get your in case of emergency binder. I'll say that again, debbiesassen.com/ICE-binder, and go get your family emergency binder and get yourself on track. Because as I said during the interview, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So go ahead, my friends, get your family emergency binder. That is an affiliate link that I shared with you, but really it's $39.99 and I make a few bucks on it and it doesn't change your price at all. So go get it. And if you want to develop your relationship with money more than just the family emergency binder, which I very strongly believe in, come and join my program, Worthy Money, because this is where we really work together for an entire year, changing your relationship with money, changing your relationship with yourself, so you believe that you are worthy of more, you are worthy of support. And I really want you in that program because you have no idea what's available to you on the other side. So go to my website, debbiesassen.com/worthy, and to join us in Worthy Money. And thank you for tuning in. I will see you next week on the Jewish Entrepreneur Podcast. Bye-bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Jewish Entrepreneur Podcast. If you want to stop underselling and under-earning and close more sales, you need to clear the limiting money beliefs that are sabotaging your business growth. Head on over to debbiesassen.com/mindset and download my free Money Mindset Workbook. Uncover and dissolve money blocks like hundreds of other entrepreneurs who are now building 6, multi-6, and 7-figure businesses and creating true financial freedom.